Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here, and this video is going to be a follow-up to the video I did last week covering how to get into Avatar and Korra comics. Basically, I said in that video it was going to be the first in a group of videos where I would cover the material that is available for Avatar and Korra outside of just the two shows. So there's Avatar The Last Airbender, Legend of Korra, there's all the comics I talked about in that video, linked in the description to that video if you haven't seen it. And then in this video I'm going to cover what is basically like the ancillary media, the other stuff that's not the obvious comics and shows. It gets a little bit more complicated here, but it's not too bad. There's not too much stuff. There's only like maybe 4 or 5 important things, and then everything else that I'm going to talk about is just going to be complete extras if you want to be like an absolute completionist and know every single thing about Avatar and Korra. So we'll start off with the two web comic series, is I suppose the best way to call them. With Avatar The Last Airbender specifically, we get a web comic, but it's basically a game. So it's called Escape from the Spirit World, and it started out as a game on Nick.com. You would answer trivia questions and you would unlock basically one of the 4 parts of this story, which is basically a 3-4 minute little web comic about one of the previous avatars. And then there's 4 of them, and together they make up this roughly 13-minute long story of what happened to Aang in between book 2 and 3 with regards to him repairing the spiritual side of what happened to him after being, quote unquote, killed, shot down by Azula just as he was about to enter the Avatar state. So the story of this is that he has to very quickly reconnect with his previous 4 lives to reconnect with the Avatar spirit so that he can at some point go into the Avatar state again and stop the cycle from ending. So what this means is that we actually get this really cool like spirit world journey that Aang goes on in between book 2 and 3 while he's unconscious, and the 4 parts correspond to each of the 4 previous avatars. So the first part is about Roku, Aang reconnecting with Roku. The second part is about Aang reconnecting with Avatar Kyoshi. The third part with Avatar Korra, and the fourth part with Avatar Yang Chen. The 2 best ones I think are the middle 2, Kyoshi and Korra. Korra especially gives us much more insight into his character. It's basically the core of what we know about his character actually comes from this rather than his appearance in the show. And then Kyoshi, we get this whole other story that she was involved in that's actually really, really interesting. I think it's absolutely one of the big things that's worth checking out. You can specifically find this on YouTube. I really don't think there's much use in checking out the specific game version, because the trivia questions are really simple, like anyone will get them, and the, I suppose, visuals behind how the game takes place really isn't overly interesting, because you get the context of what's happening from just the actual webcomic portions. So the full thing, the full 13-minute story content's available on YouTube. I'll have a link in the description and in the pinned comment to how you can view Escape from the Spirit World. Legend of Korra also got a webcomic, or a web series in this case. It's a little bit, obviously, it happened many years later, so obviously it's much better quality. It's a 3-part series called Republic City Hustle, and it focuses on Mako and Korra Mako and Bolin when they were younger, and specifically covering how they went from basically running with the Triple Threat Triads to transitioning into actually starting pro bending training, basically how they meet Toza and get out of one life and kind of start their life that we meet them in during Korra. So really cool 3-part series. It was initially put up on Nick.com. I think it's you can find it in full on the Book 4 Blu-ray, Book 4 Balanced Blu-ray. They only put one part of it for some reason on the DVDs. No idea why they did that. But I will have links to all 3 parts of Republic City Hustle in the description and in the pinned comment, so you can find it. The last, I suppose, main piece of story content that we get is from the Legend of Korra video game. Now, there are 2 versions of this game. There's the console version, and then there's the separate portable 3DS version. The 3DS version you can more or less ignore because it, as far as I'm concerned, it's one of the least distributed 3DS games, the least talked about 3DS games I've ever seen. It was only released in America, as far as I'm aware. And while it is slightly different, because of course it's a completely different style of game to the console version, the story I think is fundamentally the same, even though I think the 3DS version maybe covers a little bit more time, but it doesn't actually reveal any more important information. So you can for most part stick to the console version of this game with it. So that means it is available on Xbox 360, Xbox One, PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, and PC. Unfortunately, I do think there has been some recent issue with Viacom and Activision, who published the game. So I actually don't think you're able to buy this game anymore. I think it's been taken down off a lot of the services. So this could be actually a tricky game to get your hands on. Unfortunately, it didn't review particularly well. So as a video game, I wouldn't say I overly recommend it. I personally enjoyed it. But would also acknowledge that it's not the best game overall. But the story specifically here focuses on a new villain that they introduce. It's set in between book 2 and 3 of the show, so just after the spirit portals have been opened, and basically the opening of the spirit portals allows a old enemy of one of the previous avatars to be freed into the physical world once again. His name is Hoondoon, and he basically tries to take revenge on the world and the current avatar, Korra. He unites what's left of the Equalists, the Chi Blockers, with the Triads and also some spirits later on in the story to basically fight Korra. It's a fairly simple story overall, but Hoondoon as a character and the kind of backstory and details behind him is at least somewhat interesting, even if the game overall isn't the best. So that's the main other material in terms of official web series, official video games with extra stories. Everything else is going to be, you're getting tiny chunks of information from specific books and so on. So I'm going to go through these fairly quickly and just give you an idea of where you can find extra information on the show. So I think the main 2 other books would be, first, the Lost Scrolls collection. This is a collection of 4 smaller books into one big book. Basically just ignore the fact almost that there are 4 separate books. Just get the collection. It's much more, I think, readily available to buy. What this book is, it's more or less aimed at kids, but half of the book sort of is a little bit of a fact file on each of the 4 nations. The 4 separate books basically respond to fire, earth, air, water. So there's each of the scrolls basically responds and is about one of the nations. They waste half of the book for the most part doing recaps of some of the early book 1 episodes from Avatar, but the other half is little fact files. Here is the kind of the animals from this nation. Here is the food that is eaten in another nation. Here is the summer is you find out the specific thing, summer would be the main kind of season associated with fire, and tiny little bits of information like that. You learn things airbenders in their training, they have to go through X amount of forms of airbending training before they can get their tattoos. There's bits of information like that. It's not overly essential, but I think it's very, this is probably the main book I'd say. It's not a dark horse book, but it's worth checking out. Similar to this book is Avatar Legacy. It's written by the same person, so it features a lot of the same information when it comes to talking about the nation specifically. But the idea with this book is that it's Aang basically creating this scrapbook that he's giving to Tenzin when Tenzin was younger. And so it gives Tenzin an insight into the world that's gone on, a bit of a recap on Aang's journey, and some extra things. What's good about this book is that there's a few pages, and it's only a few pages, where you get Katara writing a note to Tenzin, and it's this really nicely written one. They get her character spot on in terms of her talking about how much it meant to Aang to have a son that was an airbender, and the struggle for them in a way as a couple, dealing with the pressure of kind of having to have an airbender as a child at some point. It's really well done. There's a little note from Aang to Tenzin, Toph to Tenzin, I think, as well. Toph at some point has a role in the book. But I think the main reason you'd buy this book is that it's one of those books that has these kind of little pull-out sort of things, little cards, pieces of paper that are meant to be these kind of in-universe artifacts. Like there's a here's a copy of Aang's wanted poster or something like that from one of the previous episodes. Here's a little map of the world. Here's a postcard from this specific location. That sort of thing. And it's cool to look at it and see kind of that stuff. Just it's not as, I suppose, high end as you'd think. A lot of it's on fairly flimsy paper. But it's still an interesting book. It's fairly cheap, and it's not a book that a lot of people know about as well. So it's one of those ones where, because there's not too much information out there about the book, I think my channel was one of the only ones that really covered it. I haven't really seen many other people talk about it apart from myself, so it's worth checking out to a degree. After that, we get into okay, for the most part, there's nothing that's really here's canon story content. Everything else is going to be more or less the creators of the show giving insight into things. So there'd be the art books. There are 5 art books, 1 for Avatar, 4 for Korra. So the 1 Avatar art book covers the art from all 3 books of Avatar, and then the 4 Korra art books cover the art from, obviously, each individual season. Each season gets a book. And in these books, obviously, you get lots of really nice art. They're all hardcover books. They're the same size as the comic hardcover collection, so they look really nice in a collection. But there's also commentary from Mike and Brian, and I think Joaquim Dos Santos at certain points, about stuff that happens. So occasionally you'll get an insight into our initial idea for this character was this, but then we changed the design and changed her story. You get that sort of insight. Again, it's up to you on if you like that behind the scenes sort of stuff. If you just want pure story content, the art book content maybe isn't going to be exactly what you want. But if you love the art books are very, very high quality and worth checking out. Next, we'll cover Avatar Extras, which is basically a re-airing of the show on Nickelodeon. When they would air reruns of it, they would air a version of the show that featured these kind of pop-up facts at certain points during the episode, and they'd literally just be text boxes with a fun fact in them. And there's one for, I think, each of the episodes. The problem with these is that half of them are not important. It's the most mundane fact, and it's very obvious. Half of them are either that makes no sense whatsoever, it's not very important, blatantly non-canon, blatantly contradictory, and then there's a handful of them that are actually okay, that's brand new, that doesn't contradict anything, that's a cool little fact. So it's sort of hard to judge if the stuff from the Avatar Extra facts should be taken as canon or not. It's very much a just read them yourself and take the ones that you think are good to be canon and just ignore the rest. I don't know. I don't believe the show has ever been available to buy anywhere where you can get the Avatar Extras versions. So I just recommend that you check out the Avatar Wiki page for the Avatar Extras, and you can read all of the facts that are available for Avatar Extras. Next is the episode commentaries from the DVDs and Blu-rays. So Avatar has episode commentaries for, I think, some of its episodes. I think Korra has episode commentaries for all of its episodes on the Blu-rays, or at least most of them. I'm not really fully sure on that. But you can find out, obviously, if there's episode commentaries available for them or not. And the idea here is that you're going to get some little extra insight into specific episodes, because the creators and voice actors are going to talk about, production on that episode and maybe give you some extra insight or context into what's going on here. And this would be obviously mainly the DVDs and Blu-rays where you get this stuff from. But again, it's not the most important information. They really tend to not give you like anything of note on these episode commentaries, but they're still interesting to listen to a degree. The last thing is, I think, has become much more well known because I've covered it quite heavily on my channel, and I think brought it to a degree into the spotlight. But if you hadn't ever found my channel, you'd probably never even know that this thing existed, and absolutely never know that there's actually some really interesting information and story information in the Avatar The Last Airbender trading card game, the Quick Strike trading card game. So there was only one set ever made for this game. It came out very early in Avatar's run. It only covers the first season of the show, and because of that, of course, I think to a degree it didn't feature a lot of the very popular characters and so on. But it's one of the only things in all of Avatar and Korra that covers any sort of information on the Air Nomad genocide. And that's because the game introduces 4 brand new characters that aren't featured anywhere else. 2 of those characters are from the Air Nomad genocide time period and directly reference stuff about that. The other 2 are more present day, the idea being that these other 2 characters more or less are characters that Team Avatar met along the way during Book 1. And if Book 1 had more episodes, you probably would have seen that more random episode featuring that character. So I think there's a lot of really fun little facts that come out of the information from the trading card game that's really, really worth checking out. I actually have 2 separate videos covering all of the information on the trading card game. So rather than going into it here, I'll just direct you to those videos. The first video is going to be all about the 4 new characters. Kinto, Jojo, Malu, and Afiko. Malu and Afiko are definitely the 2 more interesting characters, but still the other 2 are at least new and interesting to a degree. The second video is basically covering all the other cards that aren't really about the new characters, but have like unique flavor text on them or something like that there's something to them. It gives an extra insight into things. And I think I have other videos on my channel as well where I touch on the card game, but all those other videos cover that. And I'll also feature a link in the description to a website where you can go to look at scans of the full set of Avatar trading cards. So you can look at the art, you can look at the flavor text yourself to figure it out if you want. But yeah, I think that's most of everything that there is. There's obviously like other merchandise that was released. There's these young novelizations of certain things, but they're all just like retelling of the stories that we already know in like different forms. There's really not much else. The only other thing I'd say is that you'll gain extra information just along the way by interacting with the fandom, hearing different people review the show, talk about the show, from my channel probably as well. If you listen to the podcast that I do about Avatar, you'll gain this stuff by just, I suppose, immersing yourself a little bit more in Avatar. There's of course the Avatar Wiki, which is always a place you can go to, and you'll find everything compiled together from all these different sources, as well as, I suppose, the other thing would be like interviews and stuff like that with the creators that happened along the way, where they maybe revealed something new that wasn't quite presented in the show, and the Avatar Wiki would probably be the best place to get that information. But that is everything basically that there is. There's the 2 shows, there's all the comics I talked about in the previous videos, and then there's what I talked about here, and that's it for Avatar. So in terms of big major canon content, there's really not all that much. It's a fairly easy universe to get into, even on a like super in-depth level. So I suppose that's more or less it for my sort of series of like, you've just watched Avatar and Korra, how do I get into the extra material videos. So thanks for watching this video, and bye.